I knew my wife was lying the moment the steam coiled off that mug and brought the smell of solvents into my Sunday kitchen. My name is Vincent Hale. I'm 34. I own a small but serious chemical testing lab on the industrial edge of Spokane, and I can tell you the difference between chamomile and a chemical trick the way a violinist can hear a single string out of tune in a symphony. The tea Sophia handed me that morning looked like honeyed comfort, but the scent floated up thin and metallic, a bitter thread woven through the herbs. Not burned, not stale. Wrong. Made you something special, babe, she said, cupping the mug with both hands like it contained the apology she hadn't said last night. The smile didn't reach her eyes. It hovered there, careful as glass. From the living room, her sister Vanessa narrated her misery to someone on speaker. The guest towel pile was hostile tear, the shower pressure an outrage, my dishwasher loading technique a human rights violation. Vanessa had been in our house 3 days. 3 days of designer perfume and weaponized smirks. 3 days of looking around my home like it was a stage set that failed her standards. She used to be a pharmaceutical sales rep. Now she was a full-time performance of superiority. Sophia angled her body toward me, away from the doorway, like we were sharing a secret. "It'll help you relax," she said softly. I lifted the cup. The steam kissed my face. Beneath the floral notes, something medicinal spread like a shadow, distinct, unmistakable. The kind of scent I only ever met when I was stripping film from a GC column or scrubbing out glassware with industrial rinse. Not the smell of a Sunday. The smell of a lab bench. "Smells strong," I said, and kissed her cheek. "You're too good to me." I didn't drink. I let the cup hang in my hand, let the heat fade, let time stretch. I've learned something in the lab over the last 8 years. When a sample makes you uneasy, you don't push through the feeling. You test. The version of us before all this had been simple. I met Sophia when she was finishing nursing school, and I was working nights pouring concrete, finishing days at the community college, and spending weekends fixing donated analytical equipment. She brought me soup when I was too stubborn to quit at midnight. She laughed at my bad pH jokes, called me her scientist even when my lab was a folding table and a second-hand centrifuge. Back then, love was coffee and chipped mugs and long drives down to the river to argue about podcasts. We were poor together, hopeful together. I built my lab one auction, one part-time consult, one wonky instrument at a time. She built a career that meant something to people in crisis. We both grew up. Then Vanessa moved back to Washington after a messy divorce, tangled her life in ours, and set up camp between us like a gold-trimmed wedge. At first, Sophia defended me when Vanessa sneered at my little science project, rolling her eyes at the word independent like it was a diagnosis. Then the defenses became smaller jokes. Then silence. Then a tone in Sophia's voice when family came up in conversation. The tone people use when they've started to be embarrassed on your behalf. The night before the tea, we'd fought the quiet kind of fight. No yelling, just the sound of two people withdrawing. "You're too sensitive about Vanessa," Sophia said, hugging herself by the sink. "And you're not sensitive enough about me," I said. We went to bed facing opposite walls. Now Sophia watched the mug in my hand like it was a lever that could change everything. In the living room, Vanessa ended her call and breezed in. She plucked the other mug off the counter, identical, steaming, unattended. "Finally, something that smells decent in this house," she said, and took a swallow before Sophia could turn. "Vanessa, wait." Sophia's voice strained. Vanessa paused, made a face, shrugged, and took another sip. "Weird aftertaste," she said. "Whatever. I need caffeine." Our eyes met. Sophia's lips parted and then closed. A little flicker crossed her face. Not guilt, not fear. Anticipation interrupted. "Vincent," she said brightly, the sound too bright. "Drink yours while it's hot." I lifted my cup, the one that smelled like normal chamomile, and set it back down. "It's a little hot still. I'll wait." She swallowed. "Right. Of course." I sat. I watched. I thought. You learn patience in my line of work because molecules don't care about your schedule. I built the lab like I built my life. Slow, careful, precise. The first checks came from testing soil for local contractors, making sure future foundations weren't poured on old spills. Then came the city water department, then a small manufacturer verifying the purity of their solvents, then a sheriff's office that needed a second set of eyes. I bought a used mass spectrometer with a mysterious fault, prayed over it, coaxed it back to life with a forum thread and a multimeter. My clients came to me because I was independent, because I had no corporate overlords to protect, because I answered my own phone. Sophia used to tell her nurse friends that I'd found benzene where a daycare's contractor swore there was none, or that I'd caught an impurity that would have cost a small paint company its biggest buyer. She said my scientist husband, like a blessing. 3 months ago, she said I should consider pivoting. Better benefits, more stability, more respect, she added quietly. She meant from her family. I told her I'd think about it. I did, in the way a man stares at the roof of his house when someone suggests replacing it with a tent. I thought about my grandfather, who worked 40 years turning wrenches in someone else's factory and died 6 months after retirement. And I thought about the farmers who brought me jars of cloudy water in calloused hands and asked me if they were poisoning their land. I thought about the way Sophia looked at me when Vanessa was in the room. An hour after breakfast, Vanessa's complaints shifted key. Ugh, stomach, she groaned, pressing a manicured hand to her abdomen. Sophia, did you use expired milk? What is wrong with your kitchen? It's probably nothing, Sophia said quickly. You ate too much last night. Within 2 hours, Vanessa was doubled over, pale as tile, stumbling between couch and bathroom. By noon she was vomiting and shivering, clutching her phone like she could text her way out of it. The house smelled like peppermint oil and panic. Sophia hovered, wringing her hands, repeating that she didn't understand, unless it's a 24-hour bug. I understood. While Sophia tended to Vanessa's fourth sprint to the guest bathroom, I poured my untouched tea into a clean 20 milliliters glass vial, capped it, labeled it in tiny letters, Sunday, 8:12 a.m., and rinsed the mug until not even a memory of scent remained. Then I sat at the table and waited. By night, the ER doctor sent us home with antiemetics and a recommendation for fluids and rest. Looks like food poisoning or a short viral thing, he said. Nothing alarming. Vanessa groaned righteous indignation. I told you it was your kitchen, she hissed at Sophia between sips of water. Sophia slept on the couch. I slept in our bed alone, the vial in my briefcase like a bullet I hadn't fired. On Monday morning, I did what I do when something feels wrong. I put it under a lens. In the lab, I warmed up the GC/MS, calibrated with standards, prepped the sample, injected, watched. The chromatogram climbed into a jagged skyline. Peaks numbered and named themselves as the software compared signatures to the library. Chamomile, honey, and there, shoulders nested in shoulders, senna-glycosides. The signature for sennacides A and B rolled across my screen like a red flag. Senna, a plant-based laxative that, in strong extract, can stop you in your tracks. Small amounts are gentle. High concentrations are a sledgehammer. It dehydrates. It weakens. It makes you miss work and miss days and miss decisions. It makes you dependent. I printed the results twice. I sat in my office staring at the paper until the black ink blurred. Sometimes truth shows up so plainly that your brain refuses to translate it as truth. My wife had brewed a dose designed to lay me flat. Vanessa drank it instead. It hit her smaller body harder than Sophia probably intended, but not hard enough to kill. Just hard enough to prove a point. Which point? When I got home that evening, Vanessa had graduated to saltine crackers and outrage. Sophia stood at the stove, stirring something determinately. The scent in the kitchen was soup, not solvents. How are you feeling? I asked, neutral. Fine, she said without turning. Worried about Vanessa, obviously, but fine. And how am I supposed to be feeling? I asked. The spoon paused midair. She set it down too carefully. What do you mean? If I drunk my tea. Her shoulders stiffened. You did. No, I said. I didn't. There are moments in a marriage when you can actually feel the floor drop. This was one. Sophia turned, and in her eyes I saw not horror or remorse, but gears. Calculating. You're being paranoid, she said. Senna leaf, I said softly. Concentrated. Sennacides A and B, enough to hospitalize. Enough to force a man to need help. Her face became a mask. I have no idea what you're talking about. I tested the tea. You what? You watched me not drink it, I said. You watched your sister drink the other one. You didn't stop her. And then you watched. She folded her arms. Even if that were true, which it isn't, why would I ever do that to you? Because you and Vanessa have been trying to herd me towards selling the business for months. Because I overheard you saying I needed something to help me see clearly. Because you could have used a few days of me incapacitated to rifle through my files, log into my machines, copy a client list. You think I'd poison you so I could read your emails? Her laugh came out brittle. I think you'd do something you could describe as not harmful, just a demonstration, I said. And I think you'd do it because someone told you it works. We stared at each other across 8 years of what I thought was us. In the living room, Vanessa coughed dramatically. I said, I want you to leave for a few days. This is my house, she snapped. It's our house, I said evenly. And I need space while I figure out why you wanted to knock me flat. She grabbed her keys. I'm going to my mother's. When you calm down, you can apologize. She left without packing a bag. Like moving had been on her list already. Vanessa called, Where's Saf? I told her errands. She accepted this, swallowed another saltine like it was a martyrdom, and turned up the TV. On Wednesday morning, I broke a rule I'd clung to since our wedding day. I searched Sophia's desk. I'd never been that man. But I wasn't going to be the man who ignored evidence in his own house, either. In the bottom drawer, beneath warranty cards and tax folders, lay a manila file labeled in Sophia's tidy nurse handwriting. Vincent, lab information. Inside were photocopies of my business license, my insurance certificates, my equipment inventory, bank statements. Copies that had lived in a locked filing cabinet at the lab. There were printouts of emails, her emails, with a man named James Morrison, business development, Trellix Analytics. Subject lines, acquisition opportunity, consolidation synergy, owner transition strategy. I read them all. James laid out Trellix's playbook with corporate cheer. We acquire independent labs and fold them into a network. We offer competitive buyouts, transition salaries, health benefits. Sophia fed him my numbers, clients, revenue, equipment age, lease terms. She sent photos of my instrument room. She sent a shot I recognized, a proprietary method printout on my corkboard. James replied with tactics that curdled my blood. Sometimes owners need a nudge to see how difficult it is to manage everything solo, he wrote. Create situational pressure. Not harmful, of course, just something to show vulnerability. Family voices concerned about finances can help. We need him to come to us. If he feels the choice is his, everyone benefits. Finder's fee will be $25,000 upon close. Finder's fee, $25,000. My wife had a price tag for my life's work. I photographed everything with my phone. Then I called my attorney, Patricia Young, and read her a summary before I'd even sat down in her office. She took the pages like they were hot. This is corporate espionage, she said. And if not criminal, it's civilly actionable. The Senate complicates it. Intent is hard to prove without an admission. But combined with these emails, it paints a pattern: coercion, manipulation, interference with your business. What do? Document. Change every password and code and lock. Move sensitive files to a secure offsite. Put your key clients on quiet alert that no one represents you but you. Do not let your wife back into the lab. And, Vincent, don't drink anything she hands you. I drove home and turned my house back into a fortress. New deadbolts. New lab alarm code. New passwords everywhere. I emailed my 3 biggest clients and wrote one sentence. If anyone contacts you about buying my lab, that person does not represent me. I didn't use Sophia's name. I didn't need to. Vanessa shuffled out, pale but improving, and gave me a delicate hug. You've been such a good caretaker, she murmured, the audacity almost funny. I hope you and Saf work out your communication issues. Me too, I said, and walked her to the door. She left trailing expensive perfume and self-pity. On Friday morning, I called the man who had coached my wife to break me. Mr. Morrison, I said when he answered, this is Vincent Hale. You've been corresponding with my wife about acquiring my laboratory. Silence. Then a professional purr. Mr. Hale, I've been hoping to connect. Sophia mentioned you might be open to conversations around transition. She mentioned a lot. I said, tell me about situational pressure and demonstrating vulnerability. Tell me about finder's fees. He cleared his throat. I'm not sure I read the emails. All of them. Let's not insult each other. A pause stretched. Perhaps we should discuss in person, he said. Coffee shop on Riverside. 2:00, I said. Bring your best explanations. He arrived on the dot. He looked younger than his emails, 30, maybe, in a suit a shade too expensive for his age. He set down a leather briefcase and tried to smile. Mr. Hale. Vincent is fine. I slid a folder across the table. He opened it. His eyes gave him away. Not the first page, but somewhere around the third, where his language grew specific. These are taken wildly out of context, I said lightly. What context makes coaching my wife to sabotage me legal? We encourage spouses to help owners think realistically, he said, palms up. We would never endorse harming anyone. You endorsed making me feel helpless, vulnerable, dependent. You paid her to get me there. We offered a finder's fee for an introduction that led to a sale, he said carefully. James, I said, leaning forward, here's what happens next. You're going to stop calling my wife, stop emailing my wife, and stop thinking about my lab. You're going to stay out of Eastern Washington. If you don't, I call the Attorney General's office with a tidy packet that includes your emails and a written, dated account of a medically necessary or visit precipitated by a TU inspired. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you the truth, I said. You don't get to make a living eating men like me. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the sales sheen had wiped away. Understood, he said. You'll receive a letter from our compliance team by Monday. Good, I said. And James, if you ever target another small lab owner around here, I'll make this public. The whole playbook. He left. His coffee sat cooling, untouched, a darker mirror of the tea that had started this. On Monday, Sophia walked into our kitchen as if the last 8 days had been a hiccup. She poured herself coffee and sat. We need to talk, she said. No, I said, placing the folder of her correspondence on the table between us. We need to read. She flipped through, expression smooth as ice. Those are private communications, she said. Between you and the man who put a price on my lab, I said. 25,000. Is that what 8 years were worth inside your head? You went through my desk. You broke into my filing cabinet and photographed my instrument room. I was trying to help you, she said, the defiance collapsing into a tired script. You're always exhausted, Vincent. You never turn off your brain. You can't keep doing everything by yourself. So you decided to make me sick, I said. To prove your point. I never poisoned anyone. Senna extract. Concentrated. Enough to keep me in the bathroom while you logged into my machines. Enough to make me cancel 3 days of clients. Enough to make me feel like I needed you. Her jaw flexed. She lifted her chin. You can't prove I intended anything. I nodded. Maybe a prosecutor wouldn't take it, but the state lab licensing board would accept a complaint about attempted interference. So would my insurer. So would your hospital's ethics committee, if you'd like to explain your side hustle. She stood abruptly. What do you want, Vincent? I want you to sign the divorce papers I'm filing today. I want a signed affidavit that you have no claim to my business, its assets, its client list, or its IP. And I want you out by Friday. You're not serious. I'm not a little science project, Sophia, I said. I'm serious. She stared out the window at our patchy lawn for a long time. The soup bubbled on the stove behind her. I could see the day we'd planted rosemary together in the spring, laughing. The day we fixed the leaky faucet with a YouTube video and teamwork. The day she brought me coffee during a snowstorm and we sat on the floor playing cards by candlelight. Those memories didn't carry us through this moment. Nothing did. I need more time, she said finally. You had years, I said. You get 4 days. She left with clothes and books and the frother she insisted never worked for our coffee maker. The house felt bigger and quieter without her. The silence wasn't lonely. It was clean. Patricia moved fast. Sophia didn't fight. In the settlement, she waived any interest in the lab, walked away from alimony, and signed a non-disparagement clause that kept both of us from torching the other in public. She wanted it quiet. Fine by me. A week later, a certified letter arrived from Trellix Analytics Compliance. It said, in polite legalese, that Trellix would not pursue acquisitions in Eastern Washington indefinitely, and that an internal review had been opened. A cashier's check for $25,000 accompanied it with a note. Refund of consultation fee. I deposited it and put the money toward a refurbished LC/MS that had been on my wish list for years. I replaced a finicky auto sampler, too. My lab got sharper where my marriage had fallen dull. And then something happened I didn't expect. Word got around, not about the drama, but about the discretion. My phone started ringing with detectives who didn't want their evidence processed by a lab with a corporate PR team, with small manufacturers who'd been burned by consolidators, with an assistant U.S. attorney who wanted an independent lab to blind test a set of samples for a case. I signed 3 new steady clients in as many months. I hired an analytical chemist part-time, a genius named Priyanka who laughed at my pH jokes and could rebuild an HPLC pump with the lights off. On a gray Thursday in late winter, Vanessa called me. First time since she'd moved back to Seattle with Sophia. "Vincent," she said, "I wanted to apologize for what happened at your house." The apology sounded like someone reading it off a teleprompter. I shouldn't have been so judgmental. "I hope you're feeling better," I said. "I am," she said quickly. "The doctor said it was a 24-hour bug." "Lucky for you," I said. She paused. "Sophia says you've been unreasonable," she blurted finally. "That you're punishing her. You know she was just trying to do what's best for you." "Vanessa," I said, and kept my voice even. "She tried to force me into a future I didn't choose. That's not best. That's control." "You're stubborn," she said, as if it were a diagnosis. "You always were. Maybe that's what it takes to build something you can't buy." She hung up without saying goodbye. After that, life didn't rush. It steadied. I built. I ran QC samples. I taught a weekend class for high school kids who thought chemistry was magic. I replaced the dead hedges by the porch with native plants that didn't need me every day. I got used to making coffee in a quiet kitchen and to the particular peace of knowing no one in my house was planning my downfall. One night, I found the box of old photos we'd stuffed in the hall closet. There we were at 26 and 24, Sophia hugging my shoulders as we posed in front of the first storefront with my name on the lease. There we were in scrubs and coveralls, grinning in an empty room that would become a lab. There she was holding a thermometer to my forehead during a flu 3 winters ago, taking care of me. I don't believe people are evil cartoons. I believe there are 1,000 choices in one body. Somewhere along the way, Sophia chose worry dressed as control. She chose a corporate promise dressed as security. She chose to let someone tell her I needed to learn helplessness to be happy. I chose not to drink the tea. A month after the divorce finalized, Patricia called me with her lawyer voice, calm steel. "Just an update. Trellix closed their internal review. Mr. Morrison is no longer with the company." "Fired?" I asked. "Separated," she said, dry. They also circulated guidelines that spouses are not to be used as motivational agents in prospective acquisitions. In other words, your packet scared them straight. "I don't mind being a cautionary tale," I said. "By the way," she added, "I got a call from a lab owner in Idaho. He said a James visited him last year with the same tactics and left a mess. He wanted to thank you. He heard you, quote, made the vultures back off." I went out on the back steps and watched a couple of black-capped chickadees bounce on a branch, light as breath. "There are a lot of us," I said. "People who built something out of stubbornness. We forget how valuable that stubbornness is until someone tries to sell it." "Document everything," Patricia said, amused. "That's your church and your sermon." Spring came. The river swelled. My lab hummed the way a machine hums when every part is clean and doing what it was made to do. Priyanka convinced me to replace the old fluorescent lights with full-spectrum LEDs, and the concrete floors glowed. We painted one wall a ridiculous happy green. Clients started dropping by not just for results, but for the feeling of the place. Bright, steady, human. Then, one windy Friday, a jittery man in his 50s showed up in a union cap with a mason jar of well water. "My grandkids drink this," he said, the jar trembling in his hands. "It tastes like pennies." We tested it. We found iron and manganese above aesthetic levels, but not dangerous contaminants. I wrote out the report, printed it, and sat with him while I explained what filtration would fix it. He cried. He said, "Everybody else told me I was overreacting." He said, "I can't pay you today. Pay me when you can," I said, and meant it. He left with the jar empty and the weight off his shoulders. I stood in the doorway after he went and realized I felt the same, lighter, steadier. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Sophia. "I heard about what you did for the Jensen case," she wrote. "Proud of you." I stared at the screen. I didn't respond. Some doors aren't for opening. Some things are beautiful at a distance, like fireworks, gorgeous and loud and over, leaving you blinking in the dark with your hearing ringing, wondering what you'll build in the quiet. Months later, a certified envelope arrived addressed to both of us at the old house. It was a final notice for a counseling appointment we'd never attended. I wrote, "Return to sender" on it and put it back in the mailbox, and felt, unexpectedly, grateful. We'd chosen not to drag our ghost into a room and talk it to death. We let it pass. A year after the tea, I closed the lab early on a Sunday and drove up to Mount Spokane in my beat-up truck. I parked where the paved road turns to dirt and hiked until the city looked small. The wind smelled clean and like pine. I sat on a rock and watched a cloud crawl across the valley like a spilled scarf. I thought about the man I was when Sophia handed me that mug. The man who wanted to keep everyone calm. The man who would have drunk something that felt wrong because he didn't want to be impolite. I thought about the man who picked up a vial instead and chose evidence over flattery. In the end, revenge wasn't blasting anyone on social media. It wasn't an arrest. It wasn't making Vanessa feel what she'd made me feel. It was a paper trail that kept wolves from the door, a letter that made a corporation rewrite a playbook, a lab that lived to hum another year. It was choosing not to be the victim of someone else's plan for my life. On the first warm morning of the new summer, I brewed tea in my kitchen, the real kind, with chamomile and mint from the little planter I'd coaxed back to life. The steam rose, floral and clean. I carried the mug to the table, sat, and breathed it in. The house was quiet. The lab was 10 minutes away, the machine sleepy and ready. I texted Priyanka, "Bring donuts, please? Calibration party." She sent back 3 lab beakers and a saxophone emoji. I sipped the tea and smiled. This cup tasted like herbs and sunlight and patience. No bitterness curled beneath. No shadow sting. Only the work of a life that had refused to be sold.